Buenas tardes, nuevamente bienvenidos a Expo Foro Virtual de Turismo Global. Ahora, en esta clausura del foro, vamos a tener la sesión plenaria de John junto a Gary, dos íconos de la industria del turismo. Ellos son CEOs y Executive Director de Gainingit. Por lo tanto, van a brindarnos nunca desperdicies una buena crisis, advocacia y real valor de la industria. Esta conferencia que nos va a abrir la cabeza a quienes estamos de alguna manera en Latinoamérica y todavía no tenemos incorporado el concepto de advocacia. Es muy importante pensar en esto, en que Latinoamérica tiene que empezar a incorporar estas nuevas y buenas prácticas que nos van a hacer mejor destinos y más elegibles a la hora de las reuniones, los congresos y los eventos. También contarles que el Expo Foro Virtual de Turismo Global continúa, si bien hoy es la clausura del foro, de todo lo que tiene que ver con las sesiones y el programa académico. Esta es nuestra última actividad y luego viene un brindis virtual al que están todos invitados luego de esta actividad que termina a 18:30, a las 18:40 los esperamos en el brindis. No se olviden que luego 17 y 18 permanece abierta la exposición. Todas las conferencias que hemos venido presenciando durante estos 3 días están on demand en la plataforma virtual. Van a poder ustedes visualizar cada una de las conferencias, revivirlas y tener la oportunidad de dárselas a conocer a todos aquellos que quieren seguir visitando nuestra plataforma. La plataforma está abierta hasta el 18, es decir, que visiten la exposición, visiten los destinos, busquen esta oferta turística que en esta plataforma hoy nos brinda la oportunidad de generar promoción turística, contar cómo están nuestros destinos vinculados a los protocolos de sanitización para recibir turistas y también a partir de mañana se van a realizar más de 1.200 citas de negocios en el marco de esta Expo Foro Virtual de Turismo Global. Trabajamos el tema de las capacitaciones para nuestros recursos humanos a través del foro. Estamos trabajando el tema vinculado a la promoción, planificación y prevención vinculada a protocolos para la recepción de nuestros turistas y también estamos trabajando el área que tiene que ver con la comercialización de los destinos. No se lo pierdan, sigan acompañando y sigan visitando la plataforma virtual para poder seguir formándose, capacitándose y viendo la oportunidad de hacer negocios. Entonces, bienvenidos a esta clausura del foro, esta sesión plenaria. Nunca desperdicie una buena crisis, advocacia y real valor de la industria. Bienvenida, querida Graciela. Bienvenido, John. John. Welcome, Gary. It's a pleasure, your presentation. Thank you. Gracie, vamos a presentarte. Vamos con la plaquita de Graciela. Vamos a presentar a Graciela, que Graciela la hemos tenido durante todo este foro, muy atenta y siempre ha sido nuestra consultora que nos ha acompañado en las diferentes actividades y las maravillosas ponencias que hemos tenido en este foro. Graciela es consultora y asesora de nuestra asociación, un orgullo tenerla a ella entre nuestro equipo de consultores, junto a otros, obviamente, todos destacados y todos colaboradores con la asociación de CVB'S LATAM. Graciela es consultora internacional con más de 2 años y 2 décadas, con más de 2 décadas de experiencia en turismo y reuniones. Colabora con nuestra asociación LATAM CVB'S, con Destinos Brasil, con el proyecto Destination Next y trabaja junto a varios destinos en las Américas. Es licenciada en turismo, tiene un MBA en marketing, habla 5 idiomas, fue la primera en Latinoamérica certificada como CDMA, especialista en marketing, gestión y desarrollo de destinos por la Destinations International. Es fanática del running, nos cuenta que también aprendió a meditar estos últimos meses. Qué bueno, todos los currículums de Graciela fueron cambiando, fueron innovando, me encanta esa modalidad. Bienvenida Graciela, welcome John, welcome Gary, the session is open.
Thank you. I'm going to introduce you both. Si me pueden poner por favor en la pantalla el currículum de, empezamos, no sé, si con Gary o con John. Bueno, empecemos con Gary. Gary Creamer es el presidente ejecutivo de Gaining Edge, el CEO, y nos habla directamente de Melbourne, Australia. Gary fundó Gaining Edge en 2004 y hasta el año pasado actuó como CEO de la empresa. Ahora es el presidente ejecutivo y tiene más de 30 años de experiencia en la industria de eventos y convenciones. Ha consultado en Tokio, Macao, Belo Horizonte, Vancouver, Houston, Washington, entre otros tantos destinos, además de trabajado para países como Sudáfrica, Malasia, Tailandia, Indonesia, Japón, Jordania, Qatar, Serbia, Brasil, y otros proyectos todos en proyectos para el desarrollo de la industria de reuniones. Gary también realizó un proyecto pro bono para nuestra querida asociación en el 2014 y este año volvemos a tener su mirada estratégica para otro proyecto gratuito que nos brindan soporte para la formación del instituto académico para nuestra región, tal cual nos presentó Paul Valli el lunes en su charla también, y ustedes pudieron participar votando en algunas prioridades estratégicas. Gary tiene extensa experiencia en consultoría en centros de convenciones, incluye viabilidad de mercado, análisis de demanda, determinación del alcance de las instalaciones, diseño y revisión del venue y de los espacios, consultoría operativa para desarrollo de centros de convenciones en Italia, Kenia, y Nigeria, Omán, Malasia, México y Australia. También sirvió en la Comisión del Centro de Convenciones Internacional de Londres, y Gary fue uno de los consultores líderes en el proyecto Destination Next, un estudio global, iniciativa de la Destinations International, que definió el futuro del turismo del marketing de destinos. Es expresidente del board de Destinations International y fue uno de los primeros 6 miembros del Hall of Fame NDI en el 2014. También recibió el premio de la Academia de IMEX Asia Pacífico en el 2007. He has 2 beautiful daughters, a lovely wife, and I was so fortunate to have the opportunity to work and learn from one of the wiser minds in our industry, someone who Vanessa and we used to say in the backstage that he's the Pope of our industry. So Gary, we are delighted to have you with us today again. And please accept my grateful best thoughts. And we are so excited and anxious to hear from you both in this great closing session. I was just mentioning that besides the pro bono project you did in 2014, I reinforced the one that we started this year, leading by John and Paul, and we presented that on Monday as well. So thank you for being us here today, and I will introduce John first with his bio, and then we start, okay? John Sivertson es el CEO de Gaining Edge y nos habla desde Vancouver, Canadá. John es el CEO y líder de Gaining Edge y durante más de 20 años ha ayudado a gobiernos, autoridades y el sector privado a llevar el concepto a la realidad en sus proyectos icónicos realizados en Canadá, Estados Unidos, Nueva Zelanda, Australia, Singapur, Hong Kong y en todo el sudeste asiático. Estos proyectos son difíciles y complejos y trabajan variados temas como centros de convenciones y exposiciones y estadios, carreteras, puentes, prisiones y proyectos de tránsito rápido, muchos de ellos iniciativas de asociaciones público-privadas. Más recientemente, John trabajó en Hong Kong, primero como líder del grupo de proyectos de capital e infraestructura para PricewaterhouseCoopers, y luego en consultoría como líder del grupo en consultoría de infraestructura para la KPMG. John trabajó anteriormente en PwC en Canadá, Nueva Zelanda, Singapur, en el área de infraestructura, y fue fundamental para lograr su estatus como el centro de excelencia para la red de PwC en el sudeste asiático, Hong Kong y China. John es un especialista en la dirección de equipos de consultoría multidisciplinarios para ayudar a los clientes a desarrollar proyectos desde el análisis de viabilidad y casos de negocios hasta la estructuración comercial, adquisiciones, finanzas, recaudación de fondos. John tiene una licenciatura en Economía en la Universidad de Victoria, un MBA en la Universidad de Alberta, Canadá. And since he is a problem solver and a guru of finances for almost a year now, he's been the CEO of Gaining Edge. And during these crazy times we're living, so challenging, he is here today because he will fix all destination organization problems. Our biggest challenge is finance. So you are the guru of funding diversification. That's it. Great to have you with us today,
Thank you,
John.
Nick.
If you're smiling, that's because it's true, right?
That's right. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that as well. We can talk about that after if you like.
Good, good. So John, while you just start sharing your screen with us, before we start, I have a question for both of you. Gary told me once that he was planning to have a house in Spain or something. So we have been hearing for these trends like these new nomads. Let's pretend you both can be a new nomad these days and live anywhere around the world for a few months. Where would that be and why, Gary?
That's a tough one. I kind of think of myself as a citizen of the world, and I've enjoyed everywhere I've been. I was going to say earlier, I know that everybody's joining us virtually, but it was good to see Silvana. And I remember very fondly a trip I took with you, Grazi, to Mendoza one time. And we actually got out to that beautiful wine country and tried some of the wine, saw how they made olive oil. And I thought the city was just beautiful. The landscapes were beautiful. So I'll pick Mendoza in deference to Silvana.
Great. You are really an ambassador for Mendoza. Thank you. What about you, John?
Well, I guess I haven't been to Mendoza, so it sounds pretty great from Gary's description. So, I mean, that's definitely be, I think, a top of the list as well. I got to say, being based in Vancouver for me is great as well, because I love the location. It's easy to get to other places from, and we have not bad summers and we have great winters. So there's so many good places to choose from, though. It would be a tough call if I had to make it again.
So we would stick with Vancouver. That's great.
Yeah,
that's
maybe,
good.
yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I could choose somewhere in the Caribbean.
Pero gracias a Gary que se la jugó, ¿eh? Gracias a Gary que se la jugó, por favor, decíselo, querida Gracie.
Thank you, Gary. Great answer of yours. So, okay, let's start with you, John. Tell us about advocacy and the real value of our industry.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here today. Before I start, I'd like to thank Silvana as president of the association. I'd like to thank you as well, Grisella, as you've supported Gaining Edge throughout the years and for being here today. So thank you very much to both of you. You've introduced who I am. So I'm John Siverdson. I'm the CEO of Gaining Edge. I've been doing this for about a year or so. Gary down at the bottom is our executive chairman, the founder of Gaining Edge as well. So who is Gaining Edge? Gaining Edge has been around since 2004. We're based in 7 cities around the world. So we think we've got a very good global understanding from that. But we also have quite good local understanding in most of the markets we operate in. So we think that's a real special edge for Gaining Edge. Who are we? We are a specialist consulting firm. We advise the international business events industry. We specialize in establishing and managing convention bureaus and destinations. We advise the development and expansion of convention centers. We provide strategic support for associations at all levels and all sizes, as well as we advise on the broader aspects of the international meetings industry. That's just a very quick overview of what Gaining Edge does. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit what we're facing from this crisis, what it means for all of us, and then Gary is going to pick up from me, continue on, and talk about a little more, give you a little more detailed insight into the opportunities that this crisis has created for different segments of the business events industry, as well as for tourism. And then I think at the end, we'll open for some questions as you like. Okay. So our topic is never waste a good crisis. And we definitely have one right now, don't we? Very unfortunately. But we think COVID is much more than the global pandemic that's really affecting all of our lives. COVID is not just a virus that can impact our health, can impact all of our health very seriously, obviously. And it's also the cause a great deal of disruption in our personal and our business lives. So, we have to deal with this disruption in the short term, but it will also drive long-term changes in all aspects of our lives. So, really, our talk today is not about COVID. Our talk today is about disruption. And disruption has always occurred, but it seems the waves of disruption are increasingly impacting more types of business and more aspects of those businesses. So much of this has been driven by technology, and COVID has only served to accelerate this disruption. And COVID won't be the last disruption we're going to experience. Climate change is happening as we speak. If you look at the cartoon from The Economist in the upper hand corner there, we've got the world fighting COVID right now, while climate change is sitting in the background as the 300-pound gorilla waiting to take us all on. So, global change waited for us to deal with the pandemic. But one thing we learned from looking at other major forces of disruption throughout recent history is really the importance of not getting stuck on these short-term impacts while ignoring other greater forces, longer-term forces that are going on. So we think, need to now more than even in normal times, have a long-term strategic view. We need to understand the long-term changes, the long-term impacts, and how best to position ourselves and our businesses to capitalize on those changes, not to ignore them, not try and disregard them, but to capitalize on them. So though COVID has a very awful impact on our lives right now, it has in fact created an opportunity for all of us to look at how in the long run we can improve our businesses, to adapt, and how to excel with this disruption. So these improvements will help us not just deal with COVID and its impacts, but possibly even greater impacts as we might see from other disruptions, such as climate change, such as technology. Okay. So I'm saying disruption's always been occurring. Change in technology has disrupted people and business throughout history. The rate of change technology, though, it is increasing, and hence the rate of disruption is increasing. And number of business sectors are increasing as well. Some of these businesses may not survive this disruption or future one. You know, just a few examples here. We've looked at taxis and hotel business models being heavily impacted and continuing to be impacted by Airbnb and Uber. They've changed how they're being paid, how much they're being paid, and who money is being paid to. It's also opened new markets and created new customers for hotels. But if you look at the other side, look at taxis, for instance, in some markets, they may not survive this disruption. We're starting to see the impact of 3D printing on manufacturing, on retail, on logistics. You know, just an example, if we look to people in their bedrooms and small businesses who were using 3D printers at the beginning of COVID to churn out personal protective equipment in areas where there wasn't enough supply of that. So we saw that here in Vancouver. I know in the US, we saw it across Europe, that happening. So that's a pretty neat thing that 5 years ago wouldn't have been possible. And this is an example of what I think is really a life-changing, but a life-saving disruption as well. If we look at things such as Google Translate, you know, now it can translate on the fly, impacting the need for translators. You know, sorry for those on the call right now, but it is something that is going to impact upon their lives. This is making it easier, making it possible, I guess you could say, for people to travel in ways they couldn't before, to have meetings in ways they couldn't before. Another example, augmented reality. We're seeing that impact on the guide industry. How is that going to change? Is it going to change the need for them or just what they do? So we're seeing some exciting things there. And if you look at AI and intelligent systems, they're making huge inroads into traditionally highly educated roles, highly complex roles, such as doctors, such as lawyers. Accounting is ripe for AI to take over the complex but repetitive task of financial auditing. So is law. So we're seeing, you know, really that technology going into all those well, certainly repetitive roles, repetitive tasks, but even into more complex tasks which have some repetition in them. So we're seeing that eating away potentially and disrupting those industries. We're seeing, you know, remote systems now able to allow doctors on one side of the globe to operate with someone on the other side of the globe. Again, things, you know, were in science fiction 5 or 10 years ago, we're seeing happen now. But machines can't address everything. Humans still have a very significant edge in being creative and responding to unique situations, something that machines can't do. And so we need to focus, we need to really capitalize on this benefit, on this change of humans. Okay. Most people aren't going to be doing the same job for life. I'm certainly not doing what I thought I was going to be doing when I was in school. And, you know, most people aren't going to be doing the same job 5 or 10 years from now. Some of these changes will be due to just to the way jobs change over life, but some or most of them will be due to technology eliminating the need for those jobs, unless you're a priest or a politician, at least for now, and that could change as well, who knows. But, you know, children are in school right now for studying for jobs that don't even exist yet, but they will by the time they graduate or soon after. So a subtle impact of, you know, of the disruptive technology has been a great increase in the need for lifelong learning, for continuing to learn new current skills, to ensure we're relevant, we're able to adapt to the changing situations, to the disruption that's going on in our life, be it from technology, be it from global change. Those who don't embrace and face this very real risk of, those who don't face the very real risk of being left behind, of not being relevant, of potentially not having a job. So this is part of the drive towards lifelong learning we're seeing. And, you know, hand in glove with that is really the moving of all of our economies to a more knowledge and creative economy. It's really another impact we're seeing of that. And as technology continues to change to create or eliminate jobs, all our economies are moving, frankly, at different speeds towards a much greater focus on creating knowledge and utilizing the creativity that humans have that we're still much better at than our machines, than our computers, than our technology. Now, finally, we can't ignore this and hope it goes away. This is a seismic shift. We must have a strategy to capitalize on it, and we have to do that or we'll be left behind and we'll be irrelevant, and nobody wants to be that. Okay. So what kind of economy are your governments seeking? Well, frankly, they're all focused on different things. We can't say that all governments are looking at the same thing, but governments can't ignore global disruption. We've seen technology via automation taking traditional jobs from people. Better machines get, the less people are needed for these jobs. These are the repetitive tasks we're talking about, which technology is helping to take away. It's helping to take, you know, to do instead. So the better machines get, less people are doing those jobs, and this will only continue more and more. So we need to help drive this knowledge, this creative economy. Governments will have to recognize this, or governments themselves will become irrelevant. As this is where our economies are headed, and this is where jobs are going to be created, not in the, as we said, in the jobs that are being automated. So, and this drive towards a knowledge and creative economy is only going to increase. So quite clearly, your response to disruption needs to be swift and it needs to be strategic. History is littered with examples of people and businesses who did not do this. Kodak was an enormous manufacturer of camera and film, but were unable to understand the disruption of digital imaging for their business, and they're now no longer with us in any substantial form. They even frankly created one of the first digital cameras, but we're able to understand how to market it, how to brand it, and so they failed. Nokia, maker of my first cell phone, I think, first mobile phone, probably many of the people here, their first mobile phone, didn't understand how the change in technology that's occurring and the change in needs of the consumer. And so they didn't adapt to, quickly enough to the drive towards smartphones. They're now out of business again in any substantial form. So, as a kind of counterpoint, look at Samsung. Look at them. They started making phones a few years after the iPhone. So they got a latecomer to this. But they've since become the largest manufacturer in the world of smartphones, though they're being challenged here and there by Huawei. But they've remained agile, they've remained relevant across this sector, but across many sectors of the economy which they operate, which for Samsung is a great deal. They understood how the world was changing, they understood how technology was changing, and they understood how the needs of their customers, which is the most important, were changing. And they shifted their business model to accommodate this, and they've seen great success from that. So these failures and these successes really teach us the importance of engaging with your customers, who in your case are your communities, to understand what this disruption is doing to their business and to their members. So, I think associations really need to review their business models, understand the impacts of COVID, the disruption of COVID and other disruptions, say climate change, on their members. Destinations themselves need to work to understand the impacts on their association and on the member community, corporate community, sorry. And also the bigger picture is what's happening in their economy, which is driving a lot of these downstream impacts. And this all really needs to happen now before it's too late for some of them. Okay. So we've seen disruption, we've seen destruction in many businesses brought about by automation, but that's comparatively slow. It generally impacted verticals, so specific businesses, specific business sectors, so not all aspects of our lives. But it has been long-term. It has seen permanent change. And this change will continue, and we're going to see it likely accelerating. Now, different to this is COVID. COVID is a natural destruction as opposed to a technological disruption. COVID has disrupted all aspects of our lives in mere weeks. Frankly, mine changed overnight almost when lockdown started. We've seen it impact horizontally across all aspects of our lives, from work to travel to home life, to how we buy groceries, to how we buy toilet paper in a lot of markets. It's been immediate, but it will be mostly short-term. It will be mostly temporary. I think, again, different is global warming, which is frankly a combination of both here we're talking, which is not going to without great changes from us. Its impacts will be felt across all aspects of life. So it will be, again, very much a horizontal impact as has been COVID. Different though, it will be long-term. It will be permanent. Though it may, and I emphasize may, in very big capital letters, may be avoidable. We hope so. But this is another disruption, one we shouldn't ignore in the face of the relatively short-term impacts, the disruption of COVID. Okay, so getting a bit more specific about destination, disruption and associations, they're likely going to see their member numbers decrease. I think most of them are. Many of our clients are. We're going to see meetings postponed. We've all been involved in that. Lots of meetings postponed in the last year. And because of that, we're going to see a financial challenge for many of these associations. But in the long term, they're going to see their members' fields, so their fields of practice, being disrupted. Fields are going to be trying to reinvent, so they maintain that, that relevance to the economy they operate in. Some will be disrupted significantly, others less so, like our politicians, our priests I mentioned earlier. We don't see much change in that. But they will all face the impacts of technology. They'll all face the impacts of COVID. They'll all face the impacts of global warming. And critically, associations are so very important, as it's really lifelong learning that comes from associations. People begin their learning in schools, like we all did, but they continue their learning and maintain their relevance to their job, to their science, to the economy, to their community, via that lifelong learning, that lifelong networking that associations provide. So associations need to lead for the members, to look at their business model, to ensure they're responsive to those members' needs, to look at what they provide, how they engage with their members, how they meet, how do they educate, to ensure that association remains relevant to that members and to their fields. And if they don't, they fail. If they're not relevant, they won't be here for much longer. Much like Kodak, much like Nokia did. They were no longer relevant and they failed. So a few thoughts for the business events industry. Destinations need to stop thinking of themselves as meeting facilitators. They are here to help drive economic progress through partnering and helping with building the association community. Really helping the associations who host the actual meetings. You need to understand not just the associations, but understand the local professional community who forms those associations. That is how you really understand your ultimate customer, who is, in the end, the one attending the meetings, right? If you help build the association community, you're helping customers for events at your destination, and therefore helping to drive your economic progress. And economic progress is the reason you are there. Destinations also need to rethink their business model. They need to research and understand not just their links to associations, but to all aspects of that business events ecosystem in which we're all in. So look at new relationships with non-traditional partners, maybe restaurants, maybe retailers, others such as that. All things that may fit into the needs of not just the association and its members, but also of tourism leisure participants. You know, there's obviously a lot more overlap with that all of the time. Destinations need to understand their overall community, engage with them, so there are like minds working together to drive economic progress. That's what destinations we really think need to be doing right now. Both destinations and associations need to provide this bold leadership, especially right now in this time of COVID, and look to new ways of thinking. So this is, I've spoken a lot, I spoke a lot about COVID. I'm going to say this slide's called "We Can't Wait for a Vaccine," and I'll explain that a little bit in detail here. But we spoke about COVID, and it'll be mostly a short-term disruption, and that's true. However, it's also worked to improve the pace, the depth, and the breadth of technology disruption. So we at Gaining Edge sat down with a bunch of data from IATA, their data, their forecasts, hotel data, a few other sectors like that. Hotel industry, to create our view on what we see as the most likely COVID disruption scenario. And we don't have a crystal ball, but this is, we think, the closest we're going to get to it. We see significant impacts until a vaccine is found and widely distributed. We don't see that happening until 2020, possibly later. But we'd like to stay optimistic. But even after that, we don't see any return to near 2019 levels until 2024 or possibly much later. So we can't wait for a vaccine hoping this goes away. If we wait for that, most of us won't be in business by 2024, and we don't want to see that. So we need to develop long-term strategies right now to address this disruption. So a few points these strategies probably should consider, and there's a lot more, but a few that I'd like to touch on right now. Corporations have realized that many small and internal events can be done virtually. This will be reflected in less corporate travel going forward, less small meetings for your association and the destinations. It'll mean less small meetings for venues. So how does this impact your business model? This trend. Business events will recover locally, then regionally, then internationally. I think everybody acknowledges that. We're already seeing that in the data. So how does this impact your business model? How do you market and brand differently to look at this transition from local to regional to international across the next couple of years? One thing is clear, in-person interaction can't be replaced by technology, at least not yet. There's lots of benefits of that, both from just in-person networking through to people getting a break and seeing other parts of the world and growing their global network. But the move towards virtuality that began pre-COVID has been greatly accelerated. Pure digital events like today will increase. Hybrid events will greatly increase and are certainly here to stay. That's been a clear message from everybody. So how will this impact, for instance, your venue design, your venue layout, the technology requirements of your venue? What do you need to do differently? How do you need to market and brand that differently? So, other considerations. I think last one, which is a consideration, but also a slightly scary point. Without business events, hotels will not recover. Recent data, recent forecasts we've seen show that hotels will plateau about a 50% occupancy. I think we saw 55% in some of the places in the US over summer. So that essentially is, we think is pretty much their max occupancy without business events. So what can you do differently to make your destination, your hotel, more attractive for business events so you're not stuck at a 50% occupancy? Those, a few points. There's lots of others there that we can go through, and if and when we have a bit more time. But these are all some of the disruptions for COVID, but also from technology. So we see the overlap for both those there. And we all need to consider really the long-term strategies we need to be developing right now to address the COVID disruption, to address the long-term impacts of technology, and also start thinking about those longer-term impacts we see coming from climate change. We have to do that now, not waiting for COVID to end before we start. Because as you can see from this chart, we probably won't be here in any significant way for a lot of businesses that are on this call. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Gary. Gary's going to give you a little more detailed discussion of the opportunities for the different segments you operate in. Thank you very much. Happy to answer some questions after this.
And
okay,
sorry to interrupt before you start, Gary. Just to let you know, we do have a few more time, just because you said that, John. Okay. But we were prepared because people are so excited with this session. Okay. So we, even though we have set up for an hour before, we have until 1 hour and a half with Q&A. Okay, that's max before they cut us live. So
that's great. So I've set the stage for a lot of Gary's points. She's going to drill into some of these more detail and add some others. If we missed something at the end, we'll field those in questions then. I think it's the best way for us to go forward. Great. All right. Great. So move on to this next slide, and we're going to get Gary. Gary's going to take over now. Thanks,
okay, thanks, John. Thanks. I just want to start by echoing what Don was saying. We're not saying that COVID's not bad. We know COVID's bad. What we're really saying is don't take your eye off the long game, because COVID's not going to be with us forever, just as the Spanish flu wasn't. And that's a distant memory, but there's going to be things that are with us forever, and we need to be prepared to deal with them. And that's why we're trying to couch this into that disruption kind of mindset. Having said that, we want to be true to the title of this session, which is all about not wasting a good crisis. Certainly, I like that title as a session, because we've been saying to people, yes, this is awful. Yes, we're all suffering. But there are good things that will come from this crisis, and there are good things that we can make come from this crisis. So now we're going to move into that part of the presentation about some of the things that we think all the industry colleagues in Latin America can do to recover faster and to actually build their future business. So I wanted to start by talking about all the different segments. I know that there are audience members that are more focused on the leisure segment, and then we've got other audience members that are destination promoters or suppliers, and that may be focused on different ones of the business events segment. So we will cover off all of those in detail, but I wanted to start with kind of the big picture view of our industry and our business. And so what I would say is that in terms of source, we know, in terms of source, we know that in the short term right now, it's going to be local and national. We know that as we move forward, it's going to be about travel bubbles. And then ultimately, as John said, we think it's going to be 23 or 24 before we're really looking at the reemergence of regional and global business. That tells us something about our strategy going forward and what we need to do to make opportunities come from this challenge. In terms of scale, yes, at first very limited. We're all suffering loss of business. And in that mid-year scale, 21 to 22, we think it's going to be a gradual process to get back to halfway to where we were, and then hopefully beyond halfway and into a new normal that reflects where we were before this all broke out. Same with spend. It'll be limited now and it'll gradually come back. I think the key thing to keep in mind is the wants of our customers, and these are a bit universal for all kinds of customers. They're going to be looking for less expensive solutions, but they're going to want their solutions or their experiences or their meetings to be as good as they always were. They're going to be looking for more flexibility. That's reflected right now in the way airlines are beginning to get rid of the cancellation fees or the change fees, because they realize that customers like me, whose money is still sitting in an airline's bank account, after they canceled my flight that we're not going to put up with that, and they're not going to induce us to come back to the market unless they are more flexible. Same is true with facilities and hotels. The contracts are going to need to be more flexible. One of the lasting things about COVID now and in the future, we think, will be more focus on clean and safe. So some of these provisions we're making, they're going to be with us for a long, long time. They're not just going to be for the next year. In general, I put it in quotes there, fresh air. In general, people are looking for clean, fresh, natural opportunities, and it will be more about, can we do more literally out in fresh air outside, but in general, how can we make things healthier? And I also think, and Don was talking about global warming, the world hasn't been taking global warming seriously, and there are too many people in this world that just think that scientists don't know what they're talking about. And I think that COVID is kind of teaching the world that scientists do know what they're talking about, and if we don't listen to scientists, we're going to be in a world of hurt. And so I do think that there will be more emphasis on sustainability. This was already happening in the marketplace among travelers, among associations, among corporations. There was already a move towards sustainable, but we think that's going to increase. And we need to keep our eyes on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. More and more, especially associations, are going to be very focused on trying to adhere and advance those goals. So what kinds of opportunities is all of this beginning to show for us? How can we make the best of a good crisis and wrest some opportunities out of this challenge that we're facing? And one is, as John said again, we got to keep our eye on the long game. We need a strategy for the future. And for the industry, that's really about destination reset. We think that destinations really need to pause and reflect and think about what the new normal is going to look like and how they're going to deal with the new normal. So that kind of reassessment. I want to stress that. And the reason I'm stressing that is that when you think about disruption, which is what the theme is here, COVID's the cause, but the effect is disruption. When you think about disruption, what is always the strategic answer to disruption for those who survive and for those who do really well in the future? And that is reviewing business models. I mean, anybody who's not reviewing their business model right now is putting themselves at risk. So strategy for the future, a very important opportunity. We think there are new market opportunities specifically because of COVID. When you think about it, we're talking about in the short term that these groups and tours aren't going to come back unless they're coming from close by catchments, local and national. So there is an opportunity to kind of refocus on those closer markets and try and reduce trip deficits. Australia is talking about making travel bubbles with New Zealand, but we've got 5 times the travelers as New Zealand. So in some ways, we need to make sure that we keep them traveling around Australia instead of going to New Zealand. Air service enhancements. Again, travel bubbles will be the first way that travel reopens, the agreement between 2 countries to let people travel between them. And that will drive air service because airlines are begging for demand, and that demand will be first made available to them in travel bubbles. So all of a sudden we have an opportunity to enhance our air service from markets that perhaps weren't served so well before. And finally, there's going to be a tectonic shift in customer preferences. So we need to be thinking about who are our customers now? How are they changing? And how are their needs and preferences changing? That's an enormous part of our strategic advance forward. There's also an opportunity for better delivery because we can develop our expertise and our local service levels. I'm going to talk about branding just briefly in a moment, but the world of branding today is not about what we say, it's about what we deliver. And so it's important that we think about our expertise and our service levels, our capacity building programs, and we need to be thinking about new products and allowing more suppliers to come into the market. The final thing is the big picture is, I put there, wanted leaders. Our industry is crying out for leadership right now, And it's really important. I say your time has come. You know, whether you're a destination leader or one of the key supplier leaders in your communities and countries, it's really important. Your time has come. We need to have some leadership, and we need to build a more united industry if you want to take advantage of these new opportunities. Okay. So opportunities for destinations in general, again, you know, a really important one is about trying to connect and engage with your local communities. We as an industry for a long time have been so customer focused that we've looked outside of our home markets and focused mostly outward facing. But what we found was over time, there were beginning to be pushback. Communities weren't so convinced that they wanted as much tourism as they were getting. And there was less support for our industry. So it's really important that we are engaging our local communities as we move forward so that we can build a stronger industry that respects local preferences and needs. And that kind of local support will also translate to increased government support, which we happen to need right now. There's also an important need to strengthen your international trade networks, to create new partnerships and find new ways of doing things, kind of expand your capabilities through partnering rather than trying to do everything yourself with perhaps reduced resources that we're all having to deal with. We need to be thinking about tuning up our itineraries. I'll cover that off a bit more in a moment. We need to be looking at the way that we're communicating and improve our website and social media channels. We need to keep a sharper focus on research because it is a changing market, and then we need to keep in pace with those changes so that we can have a truly strategic and successful response. And finally, as I said, we need to rethink our brand promises and relevance. Is it time for a change? I would say any destination, any company that's not reconsidering its brand promise right now is another company that's a bit in danger. As the world changes dramatically, as markets change, as customers change, we need to look at what our promises are to these markets and customers and make sure they're still relevant. Next one. So now I want to go into a bit more detail on each of the segments, and I'll start with leisure. And what I'm doing here is kind of talking about some of what we think at Gaining Edge are the game changers that need to be addressed and how it relates to our opportunities as an industry. The game changer in leisure, we think, is the tourism industry is more important than most people thought. And I'm referring back to that issue about two things. First, communities like Barcelona is a prime example, where the community was actually losing support for the visitor industry because they were tired, they were overwhelmed, they thought that the fabric of their communities was being undermined by the level of tourism. So we had people who were losing confidence in tourism and not supporting tourism. We also had government officials who kind of thought, well, tourism's not so important because it's lower paid jobs. And so government officials tend not to focus so much on tourism when they're thinking about their economic development strategies. Well, COVID gave us a big opportunity here because the whole world has figured out that tourism is really, really an important underpinning of virtually every economy. And every economy is hurting, and one of the biggest downside sectors is tourism. So I think the world's gotten the message that we're at the helm of a very important industry. So how do we relate to government priorities? And I want to start at the government level. And government is a customer of ours. Government's a key supporter of ours. Without question, I'll say this to Latin America, without question, you have one of the toughest challenges in the world in terms of the lack of adequate government focus and government support. I say that because most bureaus, there are good bureaus, as an example, in many cities in Latin America, but most of the bureaus in Latin America are severely under-resourced. And that means that it's hurting the whole industry and all the members of those bureaus, all the industry partners and the suppliers. So it's really important in Latin America, especially, to try and get the government to come to the party and to really understand and respect how important our industry is. So the way we relate to their priorities, and these quotes are, this is what governments are thinking. Government assistance for people out of work is sending our deficit through the roof. That's what they're thinking. You know, they're all going into severe deficit situations, and they realize one of the hardest hit sectors is hospitality. We need tourists back here now to get people employed again, and we need to get this foreign exchange rolling again. So that's where their mindset is. We all know that. The opportunities, obviously, are to try and induce governments to provide short-term stimulus funding to support the growth of the industry. And therefore, we may be able to do more than we've done in the past. We may fix the dysfunction in Latin America in terms of lack of adequate government support for our industry. I want to kind of stress that government has not started stimulation yet in terms of stimulating the economy. All of government spending so far has been defensive. It's been trying to put the finger in the hole in the dike in terms of job loss and the fall of the economy. So far it's been defensive to try and stop the economy from getting worse. They haven't started spending to make the economy better. They will start doing that, and we need to make sure that we're in the proper place in line to get support for our industry, and they should be positively disposed. We also need better engagement with government on the longer term. Once COVID's over, we don't want them to all of a sudden decide, okay, we fixed that. We need to understand that there needs to be an ongoing, meaningful effort. Next slide. So for the business events, we think the game changer is this, and to me, this is a really important concept. Our industry is not about the consumption of hospitality supply. It's about global trade and intellectual engagement. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that because, of course, when we have business events in communities, we're consuming hospitality supply. And of course, we're an important part of that. And it's important that the hospitality industry thrives. And so essentially, we need that kind of consumption, but that should not be the main value principle that we put forward. And I want to put it this way. Again, if I'm a tourism minister, I'm thinking I need to get people back to work, and I need to get money flowing again. How am I going to do that? I'm going to look to the market segments that have the shortest time horizons. And therefore, I'm going to look to leisure, which is good, important. But on the business event side, we have longer planning horizons. We're not that immediate impact that's going to bring back business and put people back to work. We have a longer planning horizon. So we need a value proposition that relates to government priorities, and that is more about trade. How do we relate to their priorities? They need to build their economies long-term as well as immediately, and have long-term stability. They need to reskill for the new normal, and they need stronger knowledge and creative economies, just like John was talking about before. So the opportunities is to move in there with business events as a key strategy rather than just being seen as a tourism market niche. It's a key strategy for creating knowledge and creative industries because it helps industries connect to the world. And government support for capacity building and global engagement through business events. Okay, next slide. For corporate meetings, we think the game changer is that, yes, they're going to have smaller budgets. Corporate budgets always get cut when recessions happen. They're going to have shifting corporate goals. They're going to look for new supply sources. You're all hearing that they're trying to shorten their supply chains so that they have more dependable supply from nearby sources. And their markets are changing. How do we relate to corporate priorities, those corporate customers? Here's what those customers are thinking. We need new products. We need dependable supply chains. We need closer supply chains, nearby, regional, not global. And we need new markets. We need stronger value chain management. At a time like this, we're rebuilding our company and the value chain that runs through our company, what our people do, the ones bringing in the raw materials, processing them, and then sending them, distributing and marketing them. We need to strengthen our value chain management. The reason I'm stressing value chain and supply chain management here is that that's what corporate meetings are all about. All corporate meetings are dealing with one of those two issues. And so that kind of cues us as to how we need to be thinking about opportunities. They're also thinking if we're not Zooming, it has to be justified. They are going to Zoom more, and they're going to have less live meetings because now they've gotten used to it and they've seen that it works and they've seen that it's very cost effective. I'm not being negative or too skeptical there about the future of live meetings. They've also figured out that live meetings have a real value, but there will be some shift to virtual. And that means when they go live, they're going to have a harder time justifying it. And they're going to need leverage. They're going to need to leverage the quality that they're accustomed to with less resources. In other words, they want more for less. They've got less money to spend, but they're still going to draw. There's going to be a drive for quality. And it's going to be a buyer's market to some extent. So they're going to get that. We're going to, as an industry, give them more for less. It's going to be very competitive. But what are the opportunities and all that in terms of how these customers are thinking? One is that you need to think in terms of corporate meetings if you're in that business, that you need stronger partnerships with local exporters, because there is going to be a big shift in supply chain management. And so all of a sudden you're going to have more local businesses that are parts of the supply chain for customers they never had before, because those are going to be new customers that are closer by looking for closer supply chains. So in essence, there's a real opportunity for partnership there, because if you're helping them bring in a meeting where somebody's wanting to manage a new supply chain, you're helping them get closer to their customers. You're not only creating a corporate meeting, but you're creating export opportunities within your market. That's a really strategic opportunity. Takes some work. It's a new thing. Not many people are doing it, but it's a real opportunity. And there needs to be a clear value proposition to the companies that you see as your market. So as you approach these corporate meetings, understand where they're coming from. They are going to need more for less, and you're going to need to find, as an industry, a way to drive that kind of value. Next one. For incentive meetings, we think the game changer is, again, smaller budgets, heightened performance expectations. What I mean by that is companies are going to be driven to squeeze more performance out of their people, because they're going to have less people, and they're going to be trying to recover, and they're going to be trying to rebuild their lost profits. So there's going to be a real pressure in terms of company performance by people in companies, which is good for the incentive market, because we know incentives, travel incentives, are a very good way to heighten performance. So there'll be a greater emphasis on incentive travel, but they're going to have less budget to do it with. And they will have some restricted destination choices, because there'll be a bit of a shareholder and board pushback on destinations that are seen as too frivolous, or too exotic, or too luxurious. So they're going to have less constricted destination choices. That's the game changer. How do we relate to what they're thinking? They are thinking we need to motivate our people more than ever before. We need to find exciting new incentive solutions closer to home, less expensive, less travel cost, less time committed. We need to leverage the quality we're accustomed to. Again, just like corporate meetings, we want the same quality we always had. We can't afford to pay for it. We're going to go to those places that give us the best cost value. So the opportunities here, I mentioned it before, a lot of destinations that maybe weren't so strong in the incentive space that weren't so strong in the incentive space before now, have an opportunity to move into that space. And we have lots of clients who think, well, we're not incentive destinations. And we say to them, anybody can be an incentive destination. What it takes is creation. You have to be creative. You have product elements, you have to package them, you have to sell them properly. So I said there, number two, it's not about assembly, it's about creation. And creativity can bring incentive products where you didn't know you had them. Conventions, the game changer is smaller member communities. All associations, those members, they're hurting financially. They're ceasing their memberships. So their communities are declining. They've got fewer sponsors, smaller meetings, reduced budgets. They will go hybrid, as John said. There was already before COVID a move in the convention industry to stress audience over membership. They wanted to expand their audience. Now that's going to accelerate, and they're learning that they can extend their audience further through virtuosity. So virtuality, and so essentially they will embrace this new technology that they've become comfortable with, and they will have virtual elements to all future meetings, we think. And they'll increasingly go to meeting hubs, meaning it won't be one meeting place for the whole world as much. It will be kind of the core meeting place, but they'll have mini hubs of meetings regionally, so that people can connect virtually between live meetings. So there may be a bit of a disaggregation of some of these meetings. How do we relate to their priorities? They are thinking we need lower cost solutions and destination partners that still want us, even though we've lost scale. Because when they become disaggregated, when they have less people going, when they begin to form mini hubs and do more stuff virtually, there's going to be less people actually traveling to these events. The good news is there'll still be these events. And the other good news is if you can be creative on trying to build your association communities, you can get a lot more regional and local events. So there are solutions to this problem. But they're thinking, how do we get these destinations to be our partners when we've lost scale, which makes us less attractive, less bodies in beds? If we go regional with our live event elements, we have more destination options, they're thinking. Okay? So if there's more regionality to their meeting patterns, all of a sudden they don't have to be in the capital city anymore. They have more destination options. The opportunities then are unified supplier communities agreeing on creative value propositions. I can't stress enough in my mind, if you want to glean advantage from this crisis, not waste a good crisis, one of the best opportunities we think you have is to create value propositions and a more unified supplier community. Unified supplier communities that work really well together, customers can tell that, and customers respond to that, and customers want that. So again, I go back to what I said, our industry is looking for leaders, and this is a real time for DMOs and for key suppliers to work together and create that leadership. They need to creatively leverage the virtual portions of hybrid events, and what I mean by that, just short, is that, again, our value proposition is more about our economic impacts and promoting our destinations as places to do business, as places to source supply, as places to do trade with and research links. So if we're trying to focus on that value proposition, it's really important that we realize it's not just the value of having people here spending money. There's a value in doing infomercials as part of these events. If we're hosting an event and there's virtual elements, we need to make sure that there's a real focus during that event on virtual technical programs, on showing local speakers with expertise, on showcasing local products. And finally, there will be a call for more subvention in this market. That's unfortunate. It's a reality. We need to live with it. And subvention will make a big difference, and all of the Latin American countries, I think, are going to need government support for that. And that support needs to be justified by a business case that's not talking about spend, it's talking about economic promotion and creating knowledge and creative societies. Next slide. My last one is on exhibitions. I know some of you in the audience are more focused on the exhibition industry. I think you would agree that there will be fewer exhibitors, meaning when you have an exhibition, it's going to be harder to rent the space. There'll be less customers because there's companies going out of business or traditional customers with less budget. They'll be renting less space, but they'll be needing more space because we're going to have more social distancing at exhibitions. There'll be fewer sponsors. They're being impacted financially, smaller shows, more local and regional focused again. There's going to be a bit of contraction in terms of how much of the business was global and how it's going to be a bit of a shift more towards regional. They'll have reduced budgets. They'll go hybrid as well. There'll be a lot more virtuality as a component of live exhibitions. And that will be monetizable, and the successful organizers will learn how to monetize their virtual portions of their exhibitions. How do we relate to organizer priorities? Here's what exhibition organizers are thinking. I need more space at less cost, not able to sell as much space, and I've got to have more space to do the distancing. I need a smart building because I need to go hybrid. I need studios in my building that I'm using now. And I need a partner probably because my own pockets are not as deep. I don't have the investment potential I used to have. So I need other people coming with capital. I need partners to make these things happen. I think there are real opportunities there in terms of JVs and grants. I'll tell you on the JV side, Again, exhibition organizers, you need to think about your domestic ones and international ones. Traditionally, domestic ones were a bit wary about international ones because they saw them as competitors. But now I think the answer for both is partnership. We're seeing some of the big German messes going into parts of Asia seeking local partners. They know they can make a difference and have good exhibitions there and make money, but they need someone to share the investment cost. So I think there's real opportunities for Latin American exhibition organizers to team up with some of the bigger companies around the world that want to be in Latin America, but don't want to take all the risks themselves. So that's JVs, and grants is an example. I'll use Singapore just very quickly. Singapore is giving grants where they're paying almost half the cost of ramping up new exhibitions, as long as they can put up a business model that shows that they're going to be able to be self-sustaining within a couple of years, and whereby they're committing to a long-term engagement. So Singapore is very proactive on getting new exhibitions going. And that is a nearer term impact. Conventions have a 4-year planning horizons. Exhibitions can be planned on shorter notice, but still a year or two out. And finally, the opportunities are near-term opportunities to create annual shows that can later be internationalized. And what I mean by that is that governments should be encouraged to help boost the economy by creating more exhibitions that may be more domestic and a little bit regional at first. But once you've got one happening, you can grow it, you can incubate it, and you can extend it internationally. So start today with local and regional exhibitions and build them into global ones. So I think, John, that's my last slide. I think we're ready, Grazi, to do a bit of the Q&A that you talked about before.
Absolutely. Wow. You both really open our minds. I am everything that I have in here, tablet, computer, phone, it's popping up and everybody's saying, I can't agree more. Thank you for putting down in words loud and clear everything. And you both have summarized everything that we have been during these 3 past days, listening from the leaders of several different organizations in our industry, and some people from some outsiders as well. So, yep, that's absolutely it. And I have lots of questions. Let's see, where can I start? So, some of the main challenges that the smaller DMOs and destinations, especially in Latin America, you already know, we don't have a lot of money. We have to keep perspective. We have to keep relevant. To keep relevant to our communities, and we have to address all the needs for this transformation that the new world asks us for. How can we address those challenges with no money? How can we have a new business model if we're struggling with no resources? And when I mean resources, it's not only money, but financial resources, but also talents.
John, you want to give it a go, or you want me to start?
Well, I was going to say, you know, I think part of the fundamental to this, which Gary touched on most of his slides, is that for any of this discussion, be it with government, be it with partners, whoever it is, you have to be able to articulate what your value offering is, both from, I'm going to say, from a branding perspective, but also from a financial perspective. And Gary said, you know, it's not just about spend, it's about return on investment. And I think that's something that the industry hasn't done very well, or with a lot of complexity. And I appreciate that it can be a complex, difficult thing to do. But there is a lot more to the discussion than just spend. There's a lot more of the knowledge creation, the other economic benefits for that other than spend, which need to be clearly articulated before that discussion can ever really happen. Otherwise, we're just talking about different things all the time.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I mean, in a way, I think the biggest opportunity that COVID is giving us is maybe getting the attention of our governments, our respective governments. I said it before, I'll be very candid here. We do work all over the world. And when I think about the world and the part of the world that I worry about the most, it's Latin America in this industry. Not because I think Latin America does pretty well in terms of regional, national regional business. But in terms of the industry's ability to really globalize, I think it's limited, and I think it's not the fault of the industry. The industry is quite capable. I think the problem is that we haven't had government's attention. Governments in Latin America really have not responded to the potential of this industry the way governments in other parts of the world have. I mean, being honest, I would say Africa kind of has the same problem, but Africa's got such a nascent industry, whereas Latin America has a very sophisticated industry. So Latin America, to me, is in a way the biggest opportunity cost in the world. And that opportunity cost is because governments didn't really understand the opportunity and they weren't investing in that opportunity. Mm-hmm. So I think COVID changes that game. I think COVID allows us, opens the door for us, Latin American industry, to have a real meaningful engagement with government. And in my mind, that message is as simple as this. Number one, this is partly about bringing in visitors, but it's really much more importantly about building knowledge and creative economies. And any governments that aren't thinking about building knowledge and creative economies, those are dinosaur governments, believe me. So I think most of the governments in Latin America really get that. The challenge for us is to make them understand why we're such an important strategy for doing that, because we are a means of bringing the world to our markets. You know, usually you have to take your market and your product and go out to the world, but we're actually a way of bringing customers, bringing thought leaders, bringing global industry to our respective countries and connecting our people to those global networks. So it's a hugely important strategy. Let me say, you know, if you want to talk to a government official and give them a case study and get their attention, just say Singapore. You know, I always say Singapore is not the smartest country in Asia when it comes to this industry. Singapore is the smartest country in the world when it comes to this industry. And the reason I say that is because Singapore built their entire world-leading economy on trade. And they realized early on that our industry was such a fundamental strategy for doing that. You see it today. The Singapore government is responding to COVID. They're putting enormous amounts of investment into rebounding their convention and exhibition business. So it is open the door for that conversation and hopefully getting them to understand that they need to make an investment where they've not made it before for two reasons: rebound this economy and to build a future strong knowledge and creative economy.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing and so true. Yeah, we have a question from the audience that asks, you were talking about this resetting of the bureaus, and do you see the CVB's getting more involved with sustainability and the United Nations global goals for those? Should we also address this type of sustainability?
Yeah. John, you want me to do that one?
I think that's yours. Thanks, Gary.
Okay. Yeah. I think at a very high level, we've got to realize that one of the things, COVID is permanently going to change the world in some ways. And one of those ways is it's going to make people more, you know, we were all talking about sustainability, but we weren't terribly serious about that, were we? I mean, we were all trying in our own ways, but I'm not sure the world has been adequately committed. The climate protocols that have been agreed are not being adhered to. We haven't made enough progress. And what I would say is this, Grazi. We talk to a lot of associations. In fact, part of what we do, we consult destinations, we consult convention centers, but we also consult associations because we want to be at both ends of that value chain. And as we're talking to associations, we're hearing more and more talk about sustainability with a specific reference to SDGs, to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. And we're hearing a lot more talk about how there can be more legacy effects from these meetings. And again, that's part of our message to government. When these meetings come, if a major medical meeting comes, it's not just that they spent money. Our medical practice is enhanced in our country. If we leverage those meetings properly, we have better health outcomes in our countries. So the whole issue of legacy has really elevated recently, and especially because of this crisis. It's important to us because that's part of our business case, our governments. We can leverage these meetings and these exhibitions that are coming in ways that benefit our society, both socially and economically. And the industry really needs to kind of have a bit of a shift, a mind shift, where we realize that, again, filling hospitality supply is a good thing and a very important thing. But we realize that the bigger picture is these broader non-tourism impacts, these broader trade, investment, industrial, economic impacts. And so I think that to go back to your question, do bureaus and does our industry need to focus more on SDGs? Yes, because that's what the customers are concerned about. They want to be able to say that they're doing the right thing. And that's going to make our destinations more appealing because it's not going to be a nice to have. It's going to be an expectation. And if you're not able to tick that box, you're going to fall out of consideration.
Eventually, it's going to be core, right?
It's going to be core, yes.
Yeah. Perfect. So sometimes stakeholder collaboration can be an issue, especially with smaller business owners that they are very busy on a daily basis and they don't understand, they don't get to know exactly what our role is, our mission, and so they don't perceive value on the work that the destination organization do. So in terms of stakeholder alignment and community engagement, what would be your advices? I would like to hear from you both in those two topics. For that.
Yeah, John, you start that one.
That's a tough one, I think. So I think, what I was hearing was a lot of the issues is trying to herd those cats, if you will, of lots of smaller businesses who don't have the time. I think, I'm probably going to keep coming back to this and maybe sound a bit repetitive, but I think the reason for a lot of that is they, again, don't see the benefits to that, to being organized, to engaging with you on that thing. They see it as someone else who wants to take their time. So I think, and again, as my point I said earlier, I'm going to keep repeating this. It is, I think, what having a clear articulation of what you're bringing to them, what benefit you bring to them, and how working with you will help grow their business. Because in the end, that's all they care about is growing their business, isn't it?
Yeah, I think part of the message to governments as well as to these local stakeholders is, you've heard about blue ocean and red ocean. Blue ocean is where you get to kind of go out without a lot of competition and just kind of, pick up business. Red ocean is where you got a lot of people in the same space trying to feed like sharks. And again, I'm not trying to be alarmist. I'm trying to be realistic, because if we're not realistic and if we don't understand the challenges, then we really are in danger. We're headed for a red ocean here. I mean, there's going to be a red ocean. And the reason I'm saying that is because we've got all these industry suppliers who have been hurt, and they're all going to be really hungry to get business back. We're going to have less business to go around because of the longer term economic impacts. Corporations losing profits, associations going out of business. Some associations will go out of business. So again, I'm an optimist. Believe me, I sound like the prophet of doom here. I'm an optimist. We can get through this. But we have to understand that if we're going to get through this, we need to know what we're facing and how we're going to deal with it. So I'm using that red ocean concept as a communication point. And the reason I'm saying that is governments need to understand it's fine. If you don't want to invest in this industry, that's okay. But you're not going to play in the red ocean. You're not going to be successful. You're going to suffer an opportunity cost because you're not going to be able to get your share of this global and regional business that's going to connect us to global and regional markets. So if you don't want to make the investment, that's okay, but it's a red ocean. You don't make the investment, we get eaten. We're not going to survive. That's up to them. I think the smart governments, and there are a lot of smart governments in Latin America, I think they'll make that investment. It's a real opportunity. Your question is about local stakeholders. I'm thinking about what you said, small businesses that don't have time. It's an amazing thing. When you go out of business, you got all the time in the world, don't you? And so my point is that if there's a red ocean, and if I'm a small business, yes, I can try and get my piece of the local business, right? But if I feel like we need to make the pie bigger, and if I feel like we need to bring in some of these meetings, exhibitions, incentive groups, corporate meetings, if I feel like that's part of the future of my business, I've got two choices. I can enter this red ocean by myself and see how well I can fight in that red ocean, or I can do it as a team. And absolutely, if you do it as a team, you're going to be more successful. So to me, again, the people who want to go it alone and don't want to start forging partnerships, forging unity, co-opetition, working together, even though we're competitors, the people who don't make that mind shift, they're not going to be around that much longer.
Yeah, absolutely. I am so happy that we are going record, and it will be available on demand so people can listen to this again and again and again till they understand it. So,
or at least once.
Yeah, or twice or three times. Anyway, so as a DMO, we are dealing with, well, some of our stakeholders that say, how can I give more for less? And at the other hand, we have to negotiate with our governments for the subventions, for these extra costs to guarantee safer and clean customer journey in our destination, etc., etc. You have been bold in terms of the need of this business case based in numbers, in ROI, in long-term relationships, and so being very practical and tactical. And John, I know you're a fundraising guru as well. Help us to bring some concrete initiatives and the main topics that should be the priorities for the Latin organization so that we can be really effective on our advocacy.
Okay. I'll start, and Gary, you step in if and when. You know, I said I have this drum I beat all the time, and it is about actually having a real analysis that you can provide. So, as I said earlier, I think one of the questions, or I can't remember when it was, but for us to be able to express what our benefit is, what value we bring, we have to be able to articulate that in a way that makes sense to people. And there is very good, robust ways of measuring that. You know, doing very detailed business cases via that. I think the one thing that, and the vast majority of people do not do those well. It's something we help people with, because we've done them all over the world for this industry. I've done them for other industries in my past. And there's a science to it. There's also an art to it. And I think, you know, to me, that's something that the LATAM Association could really help people with, is helping to develop that business case, which helps articulate their benefits, both financially, but also qualitatively in what you bring in other benefits, legacy benefits, which Gary talked about, knowledge creation benefits, which aren't a hard number, but are part of a very strong and compelling business case, whether it be going to government to raise funds for this, or whether you're going out from a convention center side to raise actual hard funds from a bank. Those are all the things you're going to be looking at. And that's where most of these things fall down, we see, is that what's brought up doesn't ask the question, or is not done to the level that needs to be. So I think that is an area that would be of enormous help, would be helping set up a template, guidance, and things like that on how you develop real business cases, be it for going out for grants, for subvention, or for, like I said, for perhaps creating different venues or expanding venues. So all those things have their own specialities in there, but they can be done as almost a template with guidance. And I think there's other things, you look to other markets around the world that have things like that you can draw on. So it's not something that has to be created from scratch. You can draw on stuff that's been done in other markets.
I want to go back to part of what you said there, Grazi, just to add to what John said. You were talking about how can these businesses that are suffering right now and maybe don't have pockets as deep as they used to have, all of a sudden do more for less. And I think there's a couple of answers there. I mean, one answer, and this sounds kind of a bit flippant, I think. But one answer is creativity. You know, it's amazing when you get people together in a room who have a real commercial mindset. If you can work together, you can get creative. One is what John said about the government's participation. I do think government support is essential in this, both in terms of subvention and in terms of helping to support the marketing effort. But the other thing to keep in mind is that we all have our own supply chains as well. So just as to a meeting or a tourist, we're part of their supply chain and they want more for less, we all have suppliers. We're middlemen in some ways, our industry. We all have subcontractors and suppliers, and they need to do more for less. So they need to come to the party as well. So I do think it's almost like a little bit of a shift in the economy, and the shift in the economy affects everyone equally. So yes, I think we got to be more creative. I think we got to get our suppliers to support us more. I think we got to get government to support us more. But ultimately, also, I want to say, it's not just about cost. It's about cost benefit, about the value. And there are ways that you can enhance value that maybe are easier than reducing cost, and that's where the focus should be.
Let me just add a little bit to that too, Gary. Something we've all discussed is that there's lots of people out there, less resource. Is there potential for somehow for these destinations or these organizations to partner together with someone who may have been in the past considered a competitor, but now at least working together, you can pool your resources and go out and grab that larger piece of the pie, because it is, we are starting almost from scratch in a lot of ways. So there's a chance here for people to get more than they had before, and share that amongst them. So that's also another opportunity, whether they could look at more creative means of partnering with people they wouldn't have considered with before.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ana Maria Viscasilias is sending you both a virtual hug, and I will read her question now. So, with all that you said in mind, who should pick the tab on expanding our industry? Subventions, events, cover internet costs, governments? They also say they have no money.
First off, hi to Ana Maria. I didn't know she was in the audience, but we're good friends, and it's good to hear that she's with us. Governments used to say they had no money, and now they've driven up the biggest deficits in world history. Money's an interesting thing. I think what governments figured out so far in what I'm calling their defensive spend is that they can't afford to not have money. They've got to go into debt, and ultimately, when you go into debt, you can eventually finance it through economic growth if you do it right. That's what they're doing, and I agree with Ana Maria's sense there. It's going to be a bit tougher now with government because they've already spent a lot of money and they've gone into huge debt. So their appetite and wherewithal to do stimulation, economic stimulation spend, it's going to be more difficult than it was during the global economic crisis, because they've already done more defensive spending now, much more than they did in terms of stimulation investment during the last big crisis. So their coffers are somewhat bare, but governments have this amazing ability to go into debt. It's not so easy for us as individuals, but nations can go into debt. Most nations are in debt. And by extending that debt further, they're able to invest in future economic growth, and they will continue doing that. But to Ana Maria's point, I think it's going to be tougher. Everybody's in line. Everybody's going to try and get government's attention. And we need to make sure we're in that line. And again, to your point about unity and getting the industry more consolidated, if government hears from 100 different voices from our industry, they're not even going to hear one of those voices. If they hear from 100 people with the same message saying, we're united, we're going to get this thing going, we need your help, they'll respond. And again, my last point of optimism here is that I think the door is more open between us and government now, because I think they get it now. I think they've seen the effects of COVID. COVID opened that door, it blew it open. And I think that we can be very prominent in that line of people that have their hands out because it's not just about saving us, it's about letting us help rebuild the economy.
Oh, well, yeah. John, would you like to add to that?
I don't have much to add. I think Gary nailed that one.
Good. So my last question for you both, before you can give us your final message is, and thank you in advance for being very honest, as you always are. Why haven't we made the changes that we know we should have been making them in the way how we do what we do? Was business too good? Or so don't touch it? Was it is it a cultural aspect of our Latin America? Is it just that I don't know how to do it better? So what have changed now with this black swan? So how can we start from now? Please help us push the region and move forward.
Sure. I'll start, I guess. I think there's always a lot of inertia in business to change, any business. So I think it's natural that the change that probably should have happened now in hindsight didn't happen. That's only natural. Crisis gives us a few things. It gives us a chance to reflect on what is really important to us. Also, a lot of us had some time at home, not be able to work, which gave us a lot of time for introspection. I know it did for our firm. We spent a lot of time thinking about what we should be doing, what we're going to change. So it's like, I don't think anybody should be too hard on themselves. I think that's only natural that we didn't do that. Hopefully, part of it was because business was so good. I think that though, I think that crisis naturally helps us to focus. So that's a lot of what we're seeing. And as I said, in my part of the talk, the crisis has also flagged up what some of these real disruptions are, what some of these real changes are that are occurring. So I think that's helped us focus on them too, because we've seen the sudden increase of technology, the sudden increase of virtual happening, which it was around the edges, but it wasn't, we thought we should, but nobody was pushing for it that hard. Now there's a sudden driver that's coming, not just top down, but from bottom up. I think that's why that's happened. So I don't think anybody should be too hard on themselves. I think it's only kind of natural, but I think we do need to seize the time now, the chance now to really capitalize on that, because we know now that it is important. We know now that it has to happen. And if we don't do it, we are now no longer relevant and will be behind.
Yeah, I'd agree about not being too hard on ourselves. You said why, Grazi, you asked why did we let this happen where we were so exposed or kind of so easily disrupted, or why didn't we do the right things earlier? And the two words that spring to my mind, one are complacency, and the other is because we're human. so I don't think we should be too hard on ourselves. But I think in a way, I thought the title of this session, which you and Silvana came up with, was brilliant, actually. Let's not waste a good crisis. There's nothing like a crisis to focus your attention. So yes, our attention wasn't so focused before. Government's attention on our industry wasn't so focused before, because maybe they're complacent too. But a good crisis focuses your attention. And I think that is, if I had to say, the number one opportunity that comes from this challenge is we've got everybody's attention now, and we need to be pretty smart about how we leverage that for the good of society as well as for the good of our industry. Yeah, we shouldn't be too hard on questioning why we didn't do more before, but like John suggests, we need to be pretty hard on ourselves if we don't take this opportunity and jump through the open door.
Right.
Yeah, well, thank you both to helping us understand a little bit more of what's going on, what should we be doing right now. We don't want to be the next Blockbuster or Kodak. We want to be the next Apple or TripAdvisor, whatever. Yeah, we are running out of time. They will cut us live in a minute. So if you want to leave your last message before Silvana thanks you again and again.
Go ahead, Gary, and I'll finish.
Yeah, my last message is just thanks everybody who attended, and let us know if we can ever be helpful. We do care about Latin America, and we're excited about your potential in the future. And Silvana, my last message to you is it's good to see you, and I really hope I get to come to Mendoza before too long, because I could stand a vacation.
Thanks, Gary. I think we all could stand a vacation, frankly. I know I could as well. No, thank you again, Silvana. Thank you, Graziella. This was, a great opportunity for us to talk. I hope everybody found it useful. We're always around to talk, offline as well. So please, thank you again. Thank you very much, and everybody have a great day.
Good job on this, both of you.
Yeah,
we
excellent. Thank
really
you.
appreciate all the support that Gaining Edge has been offering for years now to the region. So thank you very much on behalf of the association and all our industry. Silvana.
Great, thank you.
Pleasure.
Incredible conference. Thank you very much. De verdad, increíble la conferencia, impresionante, awesome, realmente impresionante la conferencia. Ha sido un aporte maravilloso para Latinoamérica. Hemos tenido un foro con oradores de lujo, realmente nos hemos nutrido de un programa académico de excelencia. Te pido, Gracie, si por favor le puedes traducir de mi parte. Tenemos unos minutos más, pedí que nos abrieran la plataforma hasta las 7, porque de verdad no tenía un segundo de desperdicio todos los conocimientos que nos compartieron John y Gary y toda la transferencia de información para optimizar la reactivación en nuestros destinos. Te pido que porfa me puedas traducir lo mejor que se pueda. Muchas gracias.
We couldn't waste all the wisdom that you are bringing to us, and we have all these groups, WhatsApp groups popping up, lots of messages, and congratulations you all for everything. We have been in these long and deep discussions through these past 3 days with the leaders from our industry from around the world. We have been listening to people from Asia, from Europe, from TripAdvisor to MMGY and MCI, and well, so we wanted this to be a big closing session, and it really is. And thank you for being so honest and for sharing in this in the way that Gaining Edge does always.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Esperamos.
Thank you.
Y esperamos, gracias por acompañarnos con el programa de responsabilidad social empresaria, con el que nos acompañan con la formación del instituto, que ya hablamos de eso, pero también les agradecemos infinitamente por apoyarnos a la región en lo que tiene que ver con profesionalización y capacitación. Y los esperamos a Gary y a John con sus familias, con sus hermosas esposas, para tomar unos vinos en Mendoza cuando esto pase. Es un destino seguro, es un destino pequeño que va a poder brindarles todas las garantías del caso para poder visitar bodegas y hacer algo de enoturismo. Gracie, gracias.
We also appreciate that Gaining Edge jumping to Latin America to support Latin America again with the CSR program, with the project that we have now. And Silvana is inviting you both with your families to bring them for your next vacations as soon as possible.
Looking forward to it.
Looking forward to it. Definitely, it'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay, good job.
Muchísimas
Thank
gracias.
you.
Right.
Y ahora
Thank you
agradecerle
so
a
much.
las... Gracias. Contá, Gracie, que estamos en 2.200, más de 2.200 registrados. Enseguida doy un número, a ver, quiero dar el último numerito final de la cantidad de registros. Un segundo. Último número que me pasaron recién, 2.257 registrados hasta el momento.
2,251 registered.
57.
No, 57.
Yes.
That speaks well for Latin America
Yeah,
speakers.
very impressive. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow.
Bueno, y en la conferencia 819 participantes que han estado intermitentes pasando por la conferencia.
And 900 people during this conference, for the full conference.
Great.
Yeah, wow.
Congratulations. Again, you did a great job, both of you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Gracias a ustedes. Ustedes fueron los artífices, nuestros oradores y speakers de lujo. Ustedes fueron nuestros artífices de tener tanta participación y tanta convocatoria. Así que muchas gracias.
We just reached these numbers because of the big names that we have with us today. So thank you very much. Appreciate from our hearts.
Our pleasure. Good to see you both.
Pleasure.
Thank you. You
Take
too.
care.
Bye-bye. Take
Okay.
care.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.
Thanks.
Gracias. Agradecer ahora, entonces, les pedimos un segundo, agradecer a todos los participantes, estos 2.257 participantes que pasaron por nuestra plataforma, que han explorado la exposición, la que sigue funcionando por por 48 horas más. Recuerden, 17 y 18 sigue la exposición abierta a todos aquellos que quieran visitar stands, que quieran conocer destinos, que quieran aplicar o tener contacto con los expositores que están en esos stands. También contarles que en un ratito tenemos el brindis virtual para los que se quieren sumar con su bebida espirituosa, con su bebida típica de su país, para hacer un brindis ya de esta finalización de este foro, pero que continúa la expo abierta, como les decimos, y mañana las citas de negocio, de más de 1.200 citas agendadas para empezar a trabajar la reactivación de los destinos. Así que bueno, agradecerles a todos quienes todos y todas las que nos han acompañado. Yo reitero mi agradecimiento a la Junta Directiva, al Board de la Asociación de Conventions and Visitor Bureaus de Latinoamérica y del Caribe. Reitero el agradecimiento a Carlos Drombo como productor, que ha trabajado incansablemente desde hace muchos meses para lograr este sueño que hoy se hizo realidad. Gracias, Carlos. Ha sido un gusto conocerte y ha sido un placer trabajar contigo. Gracias, Miguel Arraca, que estuvo a cargo de todo el área comercial del evento, que funcionó muy bien en momentos muy dificultosos, pero donde se hicieron todos los esfuerzos porque la asociación le brindó a cada buró un stand sin cargo para poder mostrar su oferta turística, para poder seguir trabajando la comercialización y empezar a reactivarnos. Y el tercer punto, las rondas de negocio, para empezar de alguna manera a ver cómo poco a poco vamos vendiendo 2021 y vamos comercializando 2022. Muy agradecida de mi parte a Graciela, a Eduardo y a Ana María nuevamente. Yo los nombro porque han sido maravillosos en su acompañamiento, en su ayuda a la asociación, en su asesoría. También agrego aquí a Vanessa Schuller, porque quizás no la hemos visto tanto en la sala A, pero nos ha estado siempre acompañando, y a todos los asesores que son parte de este grupo de líderes de la industria latinoamericana que día a día se esfuerzan, trabajan, ponen su pasión por esta nuestra industria de reuniones. Recordemos, yo me sumo, unidos somos más fuertes, y gracias por acompañarnos. Los esperamos ahí en un ratito, en un momento de relax, para poder brindar juntos y despedirnos ya de esta parte académica del foro y seguir mañana con los negocios y seguir mañana con la exposición. Muchas gracias, hasta luego. Muy amables. Gracias, bye. Thank you very much.